Let me ask you something. When was the last time you finished a Fallout game and actually wanted to talk about it? Not the builds, or bugs, or mods, the actual story, the choices you made, whether you do it differently. For most people, that game was New Vegas, which came out 16 years ago. Bethesda has made 2 Fallout games since then, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, and neither of them, and I say this as someone who has put embarrassing amounts of time into both, is in that conversation. Nobody's debating whether they should have sided with the Institute. Nobody's still arguing about the Minutemen ending at 2 in the morning. The games came out, people played them, and then everyone went back to talking about New Vegas. So what did Obsidian do that Bethesda hasn't managed to do since? And why hasn't Bethesda just asked them to do it again? Here's the thing about New Vegas that I think gets undersold. It's not just that the writing is better or that the factions are more interesting, it's that the game actually knows what it's about. Every faction is making an argument about what civilization should look like after the world ends. The NCR is the promise of civilization, democracy, rule of law, infrastructure, all the things that sound good on paper. But by the time you arrive in the Mojave, the NCR is overstretched, corrupt, and taxing communities into poverty while their senators argue over water rights. They're not villains, they're just what happens when good intentions meet bureaucracy and time. Caesar's Legion is the counter-argument. Brutal, yes. Horrifying in places, absolutely. But Caesar will tell you exactly what he is and exactly why he thinks it works. And if you engage with the argument rather than just recoiling from the aesthetics, it's harder to dismiss than it should be. A stable, disciplined society built on slavery versus a free society slowly collapsing under its own weight. The game doesn't tell you which is worse, it makes you decide. Mr. House says skip the whole debate. Ideology is the problem, not the solution. Put one competent person in charge, protect the infrastructure, keep the lights on, and let humanity figure out the rest from a position of stability rather than desperation. Is he right? Is handing civilization to one immortal casino owner actually the best available option? I've played New Vegas 4 times, and I still go back and forth on Mr. House. And then yes man, burn it all down. No NCR, no Legion, no House, just you, the Mojave, and the completely open question of whether any of this was worth it. None of those are wrong answers. None of them are clearly right either. You finish the game and you're not sure you made the right call. That uncertainty is the point. That's what good role-playing feels like. Now let's talk about Fallout 4. And I want to be careful here because Fallout 4 is a great game, genuinely. The combat is satisfying, the base building is addictive, the world is dense and detailed and full of things to find. As a looter shooter with RPG aesthetics, it's excellent. I've put thousands of hours into it and I don't regret a single one. But as a role-playing game, it has a fundamental problem, and that problem is the Institute. Bethesda clearly wanted the Institute to be morally ambiguous. The loading screen tips tell you they might be humanity's last hope. Their scientists will explain at length that everything they do is in service of human progress. Father, your son, the person you've spent the whole game looking for, turns out to be their leader, and he genuinely believes in the work. But here's what the Institute actually does. They kidnap people, replace them with synths, and send those synths back into communities to live as sleeper agents for no clearly explained reason. They murder settlers, they terrorize the surface while living in a pristine underground facility and refusing to share their technology with anyone. When you first arrive, a scientist casually mentions an experiment involving a synth child that is designed shot for shot to make you feel sick. The game tells you they might be the last hope for humanity. Everything they show you tells you they're the villains. There's no version of that faction that a reasonable person looks at and thinks, yeah, I'm going to side with them because I genuinely believe in their mission. Here's what Chris Avellone, New Vegas' lead writer, said. If you never feel torn, it isn't role-playing, it's just a shooting gallery. Fallout 4's Brotherhood, Railroad, Minutemen, even the Institute, none make you wrestle with ideology the way Caesar's Legion forced you to. You side with the Institute because you want to see what happens or because you're doing a completionist run. not because the game made you believe in them. Compare that to Caesar's Legion. You can find Caesar's Legion genuinely compelling if you engage with the argument. You might be wrong to find them compelling, but the game respects you enough to let you get there. Fallout 4 doesn't do that. The Brotherhood of Steel are authoritarian, but presented as borderline heroic. The Railroad are good, but kind of naive. The Minutemen are just there, and the Institute are evil, with a thin coat of moral ambiguity paint that fools nobody. The game went through the motions of faction complexity without doing the actual work of making the factions complex. That's the difference between a great game and a great RPG. Fallout 4 is a great game. Fallout New Vegas is both. So why hasn't Bethesda fixed this? They've had 2 attempts since New Vegas. Why is the writing still the weakest part of every Bethesda Fallout? Part of the answer is that Bethesda builds worlds and Obsidian builds stories. Those are different skills, they require different priorities, and they don't automatically transfer. The environmental storytelling in Fallout 4, finding 2 skeletons, one clutching a locket and one clutching a knife, piecing together a story that was never written down anywhere. That's genuine craft. Bethesda is brilliant at making a world feel lived in. The problem is that a beautifully crafted world with nothing to say is just a very pretty backdrop. You wander through it, you appreciate it, and then the main quest asks you to care about finding your son, and you realize the game hasn't given you a single reason to care about anything that's happening politically or ideologically. You're just shooting things in a very well-designed environment. What would happen if you combined both? Bethesda's world building and Obsidian's writing. We got a partial answer to that question once, under conditions that were actively working against it. New Vegas was made in 18 months, smaller budget, side project. Obsidian were running on fumes by the time they shipped it. The game launched with significant bugs, which is part of why the Metacritic score landed where it did, and it's still the game everyone talks about 15 years later. Which brings us to the ugliest part of this story. After New Vegas shipped, Obsidian's bonus was tied to a Metacritic score they missed by 1 point. 1 point. Bethesda didn't pay it. The relationship soured, Obsidian went off and made other games. And that was essentially the end of any formal collaboration. Now Bethesda will tell you that's just how contracts work, and technically they're right. But the optics of not paying the bonus on the game that saved your franchise's critical reputation, the game that people are still modding and debating while your mainline entries get forgotten, those optics are not great. And even setting the money aside, there's a more uncomfortable reason a second Obsidian Fallout probably wasn't going to happen anyway. New Vegas made Fallout 3 look shallow. It came out 2 years after Fallout 3 and immediately became the measuring stick for what Fallout could be. Every Bethesda Fallout since has been compared to it and found wanting. If you're about to release Fallout 5, do you really want to commission a game that will immediately invite the same comparison? A game that makes your own mainline entry look like it's missing something? Here's where the story gets interesting though. Because something changed in 2021 that most people haven't fully thought through. Microsoft acquired Bethesda, and Microsoft already owned Obsidian. For the first time since New Vegas, both studios are under the same parent company. The corporate barrier that made collaboration difficult is gone. Microsoft could, in theory, walk into a meeting and say, Obsidian, Bethesda, figure it out, make a Fallout game together. So far, that hasn't happened. Obsidian has been working on Avowed and the Outer Worlds series. Bethesda is presumably working on Fallout 5 at some point. After Elder Scrolls 6, the studios are operating independently, which is how Microsoft generally manages its acquisitions. But the possibility exists now in a way it didn't before. And if Fallout 5 ships and the conversation immediately goes back to, yeah, but it's no New Vegas, Microsoft might eventually decide that the smartest thing they can do with 2 studios they own is let them work together. Here's what I keep coming back to though. After Fallout 76 launched as arguably the worst game in the franchise, no NPCs, no real story, a world full of content but nothing to care about, Bethesda patched it, updated it, kept adding content, and eventually built a functional player base. The game recovered, people came back, and what that proved, to Bethesda at least, is that the floor is basically unbreakable. No matter how bad a Fallout launch is, the audience absorbs it. The brand is resilient, the TV show is a hit, the merchandise sells. From a business perspective, everything is fine, which means there's no pressure to change, no reason to take the risk of handing over creative control to another studio, or to push the writing team to do something more demanding, or to make a Fallout game that prioritizes what New Vegas prioritized. Safe, big, and polished enough is working. Why mess with it? The frustrating thing is that Obsidian clearly still has it. True, Outer Worlds and Outer Worlds 2 weren't exactly on the level of New Vegas, but I thought they were underappreciated and pretty good games in their own right. The talent is there, the track record is there, the corporate structure now makes collaboration possible in a way it never was before. But wanting it to happen and it actually happening are very different things. Maybe Fallout 5 comes out and it's the game everyone has been waiting for. Maybe Bethesda has been quietly learning from 15 years of comparisons and they ship something that finally makes people stop bringing up New Vegas. I genuinely hope that's what happens. I've just been waiting 15 years for them to prove it, and I'm running out of reasons to think this time will be different.